Hello friend, this is me, your host. Welcome back to our channel. I hope you all are well. So today I'm back with another video to give a review on another book, which is a memoir of love, loss and healing. And the book is Echoes of the Heart. This book is by Dr. Muhammad Naveed Akbar. As we have completed its first chapter in the last videos, if you guys haven't watched it yet, you can visit our channel and watch it there. So let's continue with the chapter 2, which is the burden of new beginnings. With each new beginning, there is a mix of hope, fear, and uncertainty. Here in this chapter, Aisha steps into a world full of possibilities and adversity. The weight of starting anew is upon her shoulders. But within it lies the ability to remake herself and her fate. That moment when a new page is turned is most often filled with uncertainty and anticipation. For Aisha, the early days in this foreign landscape are characterized by the are characterized by the are characterized by the fight to gain ground, swaying at swaying at between the practical imperatives of survival and the emotional pain of leaving behind the familiar. The obstacles of language, solitude, and pangs of connection smother her spirit, yet she also discovers tiny glows of hope, moments of unexpected courtesy, transient happiness, and the earliest tentative steps towards being home. This chapter explores the conflict between the daunting possibility of beginning anew and the primal human desire to grow beyond previous limits. 2.1 When words felt foreign in her mouth. Language was no longer just a tool for communication. It had become a battlefield. The words that once rolled effortlessly from her tongue now hesitated, stumbled, and sometimes disappeared. Disappeared altogether. Aisha stood at the counter of a small cafe trying to pronounce the name of a pastry she had seen others order. Her mouth formed the syllables awkwardly, and the cashier tilted his head, confused. She repeated it more quietly this time, her cheeks burning with self consciousness. Moments like these chipped away at her confidence, reducing her to a girl who suddenly felt alien, even in her own skin. Back home, her words had been her strength. She was articulate, quick witted, someone who played with language like a violinist plays with strings, deftly, skillfully. Here she felt like she was learning to speak all over again. Her sentences jagged and broken, her thoughts slowed down by translation. Simple exchanges took monumental effort. The rhythm of the new language felt offbeat. The grammar rules elusive. Conversations left her mentally exhausted, as if every word had to be coaxed out of hiding. She found herself avoiding interactions out of fear of embarrassment, even when she knew what to say. Her accent betrayed her, branding her as an outsider. It was not just about pronunciation, it was about identity. Every time someone corrected her or looked at her blankly, She felt her sense of self diminish. It wasn't only her voice that faltered, it was her confidence, her dignity. The experience was humbling, even humiliating, and yet it also held the seeds of a quiet resilience. She began practicing in front of the mirror, repeating phrases aloud, mimicking new anchors, memorizing expressions. At night, she would read children's books out loud, slowly, deliberately, listening to rhythm for flow. What once felt like defeat gradually transformed into discipline. Each word she mastered was a reclaimed piece of herself. Her accent didn't disappear, but started she started wearing it with pride. It was sign of two worlds meeting in her mind, a history merging with a future. One evening, during a group conversation at her language class, she made a joke in the new language. It wasn't perfect, but it landed. The room erupted in laughter, and for the first time, she wasn't laughing as an observer. She was part of the moment. That joy, that fleeting sense of inclusion, became her motivation to keep going. Fluency was not her destination, connection was, and she was slowly, courageous, building a bridge, one word at a time. In time, she learned that language was not just about grammar and vocabulary, it was about belonging, and even more deeply, about being heard. And the more she tried, the more the world began to listen not just to her words, but to the quiet strength behind them. Letters she wrote but never sent. During the long, quiet evenings, Aisha developed a ritual. She would sit by the window, pen in hand, and write letters to people she no longer spoke to, some still living, others long gone. The act was never about receiving a reply. These letters were offerings, confessions, closures. She wrote to her childhood best friend, whom she hadn't spoken to in years, to her grandmother, who had passed away, to an old version of herself who had once dreamed so vividly of what life could become. Each letter was deeply personal, a thread connecting her present self to the past that had shaped her. The letter to her father was the longest. In it, she spoke of how much she missed the silence they used to share. Not awkward silence, but the comfortable kind where presence was enough. She wrote about the she felt to make something of her life here, to honor the sacrifices they had all made. She told him about her fears, her tiny victories, and how some days she felt like she was feeling them all. She didn't mail it. She didn't need to. Writing it was enough. She also wrote to people who had hurt her, not out of anger, but from a place of clarity. She needed to let go of the grudges she had carried like stones in her chest. The act of writing became a form of emotional cleansing. There was no audience, no judgment, only the pure truth of what she felt, captured in ink and folded into quiet pages. These letters, though never sent, became a map of her inner world. There were times she would revisit them, tracing the words with her fingers, rereading her pain and growth, her longing and release. They were not polished, they were messy, filled with rawness, misspellings, crossed out lines, but they were honest, and in their honesty, they offered her peace. It was not Gloria she sought, but clarity. But clarity. The letters remained tucked in a special drawer, wrapped in a ribbon like secret treasures. Sometimes she imagined someone finding them long after she was gone and reading them as fragments of a life deeply lived. Other times she thought maybe one day she had delivered them when the moment felt right, when she was strong enough to face what had been left unsaid. In writing these letters, Aisha discovered something profound. Healing doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes, sometimes it just requires acknowledgement. A whispered truth written in solitude can carry more weight than words spoken aloud. The sound of her mother's voice over the phone. Every call home began the same way. Her mother's voice, trembling with restrained emotion, would say her name, not as a question, but as confirmation that she still existed, that she was still holding on, that distance had not unraveled the bond between them. That voice was a lifeline, even when the connection was poor, when the words crackled or came through with a delay. The sound alone brought Aisha to tears. It was the same voice that had once soothed her after nightmares, reminded her to wear her sweater in the cold, and told her bedtime stories in the dark. The conversations themselves were simple. Her mother rarely asked too many questions, perhaps out of fear. that the answers would unsettle her. Did you eat? Are you sleeping well? Did you make any new friends? Each query was heavy with unsaid worries. Aisha would answer in half truths, not out of dishonesty, but out of love. She wanted to protect her mother from the loneliness, the struggle, the small humiliations she faced daily. And yet, somehow, her mother always knew more than she was told. A mother's heart recognizes pain even when it's spoken in cheerful tones. There were times when Aisha would speak without filters, when the loneliness would break through her resolve and she'd admit how hard it was. Her mother never offered solutions. Instead, she listened. I truly listened. And then she would say, I am proud of you, in a voice that stitched her back together. It was not pride in accomplishments or success, but in the mere fact that Aisha was enduring with grace. It was a love not contingent on achievement, rooted in unwavering presence. Sometimes they would fall into comfortable silence, each on their end of the world, breathing together. Those moments were sacred. They reminded Aisha that home wasn't just a place, it was a sound, a voice, a heartbeat that had traveled oceans to reach her. Even when the call ended, the echo of her mother's words stayed with her, offering warmth on cold days and courage on difficult nights. Aisha began recording snippets of their conversations, not to replay the content, but to capture the emotion. On nights when she felt lost, she would listen to her mother saying her name. It grounded her, reminding her of who she was and who she was becoming. It reminded her that love could travel across time zones through static and silence and still feel as near as a whisper. And in that realization, She found strength not just to survive the days ahead, but to embrace them. Her mother's voice became her anchor, her compass, her quiet sanctuary in a world that often felt too loud and too foreign. 2.4 The market street that made her think of home. Her first encounter with the market street had been deja vu, a curious mix of past and present. It was the smells that attacked her senses first: turmeric, cumin, roasted nuts, and something sweet being fried in oil. Then the colors: vibrant clothes, brass lanterns, baskets full of fruits that shimmered in sunlight. She stood there, dazed not by the commotion but by the familiarity. It was as if strolling through the page of her youth, printed in another language, yet readable to her soul. Vendors shouted in various languages, but their body language was common. A nod to the left, a smile on the other side. She saw the old woman measuring lentils with the same measured stroke as the shopkeeper by her grandmother's residence. She saw a small boy running after a rolling orange down the lane. Laughing as if there was nothing but joy in the world. It was then that Aisha became aware of something strong. Migration does not destroy culture, it resettles it in a different soil, where it flourishes in new and wonderful ways. She spent hours there, not just shopping, but observing, breathing it in. The spices reminded her of afternoon in her mother's kitchen. The fabrics echoed the dresses worn during Eid, the laughter, the rhythm, the noise of it felt like home, but painted with a different brush. For the first time since her arrival, she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt like a thread in the tapestry, a part of the noise and beauty. A shopkeeper gave her a complimentary piece of baklava when she strolled over the coast. His eyes furrowed when she thanked him in his own tongue. You are new, he said, but you are one of us. She did not know what to say, so she smiled, fighting back tears. That little act of goodness was worth all the belonging. It made her remember that community is not constructed overnight, but it starts with gestures, with affection, with communal flavors and comforting smells. She turned the market street into a weekly ritual. It was her ground of healing space where she didn't have to tell anyone who she was or why she was there. She could simply be. She could blend and be and live. And every week, as she labored home with bags full of fresh greens, freshly baked bread, and sticky dates, she labored home with something infinitely more valuable, the reassurance of remembered joy. As time passed, the vendors started to know her. They inquired about her week. They offered her the prime choices. And then suddenly, the strange city started finding a place of her, not out of sympathy, but out of shared connection. The journal that had her unspoken prayers. Years before she immigrated to a foreign land, Aisha had maintained a journal, but here it became crutch. It became the only arena where she could speak without apology, no need for translation, not judgmental fear. Her journal pages were wholly soaking up her frustration, her hope, her thankfulness, and above all, her silent prayers. They were not necessarily religious in the traditional way, but intensely spiritual whispers of a soul attempting to find order in the unknown. She often began entries with Ya Allah, followed by whatever her heart needed to unload that day. Sometimes it was a plea for strength, other times it was a thank you for the small mercies, a sunny morning, a smile for a stranger, a phone call that came at the right time. She didn't worry about grammar or coherence. The journal didn't demand perfection, it only asked for truth. There were passages penned in tears, where the ink blotted and the words broke down into shuddering lines. But there were pages filled with happiness, post it notes of things that made her happy, dreams she was brave enough to have. Lines that she lived. These passages recorded her path not only geographically but religiously. They'd mapped her becoming, they attested to the transformation of a woman getting back her voice. One night, in an profound instant of profound uncertainty, she jotted down a prayer, requested a sign that she was headed in the right direction. The next morning, the next morning, she had an email inquiring if she was interested in accepting a scholarship she hadn't hoped to receive. She didn't think it was coincidental. She thought it was an answer. It wasn't always this clear cut, but the journalizing itself was like putting her burdens in Code's hands. As time passed, she started to go through older entries. She was amazed at how far she had traveled, how strong she had been, even on the days she believed she was disintegrating. Her own words were her teacher, her reminder, her testament. The journal contained not only her prayers but the responses she had unknowingly received. Aisha adorned the cover with pressed flowers, dry leaves, and calligraphy verses that spoke of home and hope. It was not just a book, it was her mirror, her confidante, her witness. And whereas others in her world perceived her only to be the woman who understood a strange land, only she comprehended the sacred path written on those pages. When the language of the heart was universal, it was through a community activity that Aisha felt the strength of connection without language. This center had put together a multicultural festival bringing people from different backgrounds to share food, music, and art. Aisha was initially reluctant, afraid she would not fit in or be too different. But something propelled her to attend, even if only as an observer. She dressed modestly, wore a soft blue scarf, and arrived with a cautious heart and curious eyes. The room was alive with noise, languages blending, children giggling, music from various corners of the traditional sort, the tables groaned under food of dozens of cultures. There were dances she had never witnessed, instruments she couldn't even name, and faces that brightened and the question of their customs. For the first time, differences were bridges and not barriers. Perfect grammar wasn't necessary for communication. There were hand signals, smiles, laughter, and mutual understanding. She sat beside a woman from a foreign country who spoke little of the shared language as well, and yet they told stories in photos on their phones, mimicked gestures, and ate from one another's plates. They laughed at the confusion and connected over shared traits. Aisha understood that compassion did not need fluency, it just needed to be present. Her cheeks were sore from smiling by the end of the night. She had danced with strangers, picked up a name for a traditional dish in three languages, and felt notice. Not as an immigrant, but as one human being. There was something deeply humbling in the recognition that the world was big and varied, but the language of the heart was still the same. Everyone craved acceptance, warmth, security, and happiness. At that moment, she was less alone. Not because her journey was now easier, but because she realized she wasn't walking it by herself. There were others around her, each with their own yearning, each learning to belong. And as a group, they took the unfamiliar and made it a little bit lovelier, a little bit more like home. The day she dreamed of a new language was more than just a milestone in language development. It was a time of emotional recovery. It was a time of emotional recovery. It was a quiet affirmation that was no longer pushing against the transformation but going with it. And that inner congruence granted her resilience she had not realized she had. This is all we have from this chapter. I hope you guys liked the review. If you did, don't forget to press the like button. And if you wanted to buy any one of the best selling books, you can buy it from our Amazon page. I'll be back with another videos with another book. Till then, just take care and goodbye.